Mr. Deputy. Mr. Deputy, I want to first start off by congratulating the member for Marco City and the leader of Her Majesty's opposition, and soon to be the next Prime Minister of the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. I mean it 100%.
We used to say that too. Yes, sir. I answer you, man. I answer you.
But Mr. Deputy, I want to really get directly into my presentation. It is once again an honor and a privilege to stand in this place and to present, not like or unlike the member for Fox Hill, who is in excess of 30 consecutive budgets. This is my 17th consecutive budget presentation while sitting in either the House of Assembly or the Senate. Mr. Deputy, I am eternally grateful for this opportunity to represent the good and the special people of East Grand Bahama. I want to say how grateful I am to the people of Sweetens Key, to High Rock, all the way to Freetown and McLeanstown and all the settlements in between, to the people in over the bridge, Shannon, Fortune Point, Fortune Bay, Chesapeake, the Ridge, Malibu Reef, Coral Gardens, Seahorse Village, and all of the subdivisions in between. Mr. Deputy, at a time when struggling families, young people, single mothers and fathers, struggling business owners and entrepreneurs are looking for relief, they are looking for help, they're looking for hope. This budget, Mr. Deputy, is disenchanting, dissatisfying, displeasing, disheartening, discouraging, and disappointing. You have all together dissed the Bahamian people. Mr. Deputy, Bahamians are concerned with their paychecks. They are concerned with grocery bills, electricity bills, gas bills, insurance bills, school fees, rent, and mortgage payments.
That's right.
They are concerned about government services. They are concerned about their health care, medication. Does it cost me more to do business? Is it easier for me to do business? Bahamians want a seat at the decision-making table, or they want to at least see the decision-making table. This budget is described as changing the status quo. That is what the government describes this budget as doing, changing the status quo. And the government's actions do change the status quo. The only problem is they change it for the worse. And your actions do change lives. It makes life more difficult, more expensive, and more frustrating for Bahamians. Rising business license fees, rising customs fees, rising national insurance, rising boat license fees, rising passenger taxes, rising cost of electricity, rising VAT on breadbasket items and medication, and rising air freight costs. The status quo needed are not these things, but the actions which will secure a greater future.
Shame on them, man.
On the deficit and the surplus, Mr. Deputy, this administration continues to ignore its own publicly stated fiscal goals and targets. They have made a mockery of the fiscal laws of the country. The PFMA, the Public Finance Management Act, states that the government must state, and I quote, the reasons for any deviation from the general principles, fiscal responsibility principles, and fiscal objectives in the previous fiscal strategy report. The government clearly stated in its 2022 fiscal strategy report that the budget of 2024-2025 should have a $287 million surplus. That's what you told the people in your fiscal strategy report. It was clear. It was unambiguous. But the government, without justification, without explanation, has brought forth a budget with a $69 million deficit. The law that this PLP administration brought to Parliament, the PFMA 2023, states that they are legally required to provide a justification. However, as it is now their habit, they have unfortunately ignored this law. This budget does change the status quo, but in changing it, it changes it in the wrong direction. This budget likes to keep secrets, unfortunately, from the people. But such a material change in the fiscal objectives requires an explanation be given to the Bahamian people. You told us that this budget, we should have a surplus, but you have presented a budget that has a deficit. The government has been keeping secrets on the deficit and continues to defy all logic that it will come close to meeting the current budget's deficit target of $131 million. The government does a disservice to the Bahamian people and destroys its own credibility when it keeps secrets and refuses to come clean on the true state of the nation's finances. Mr. Deputy, the Prime Minister made a number of quotes in the paper, but he didn't quote this morning's paper. And this morning's paper in the business section says budget optimism tempered by fiscal surplus backup. Well, yeah, I read the whole report. Santander, the bank, urges clarity as 3 revisions in 15 months. The government initially, and I quote from the paper, the government initially forecast in 2022, the fiscal strategy report that released in February of 2023, that it would produce a $287 million surplus. This was altered 3 months later in the 2023-2024 budget, where you said you would have a $109 million surplus. The Global Bank said that the slower than anticipated fiscal consolidation path exposes the Bahamas to higher vulnerability from external economic and climate shocks, and it seeks to rebuild a badly needed headroom following the combined $13.1 billion hit inflicted by COVID and Hurricane Dorian. Santander said the decline in the price of outstanding Bahamian government foreign currency debt immediately following the budget's unveiling may reflect the market disappointment with the revised surplus backup. Mr. Deputy, the fiscal position. Here is the truth, and the numbers do not lie. The government has abandoned their surplus target. Number 2, total revenue is behind projections. According to your numbers. After 9 months, revenue collected stands at 67% of the forecasted full-year total, well behind last year's pace, when the collections stood at 73%. Tell the Bahamian people why. Have you made the appropriate adjustments for next year's budget? Of course not. Number 3, total VAT collections is behind. VAT receipts, one of the largest revenue generators, is behind 62.5% of the total forecasted revenue for the fiscal year, when it should be closer to 75%. Why are we so far behind? Stop keeping secrets and come clean with the Bahamian people.
Come clean.
Number 4, then there is the $500 million loan. The various explanations given just do not add up. The Prime Minister told Parliament and the people that the proceeds of the $500 million loan were not, by covenant agreement, to be used on debt refinancing or paying over rollover debt or rollover or paying existing loans. These were his words. But the government's own public debt statistical bulletin report demonstrates that the government had to use a portion of the $500 million loan proceeds for rollover debts and not just budget expenditure. Why is that? The report at page 13 points out that the government this fiscal year took on a total of $111 million in foreign currency loans and used most of that to repay the $662 million in existing debt. Simple math would demonstrate that a substantial portion of that $500 million would have had to be used to facilitate this debt refinancing. Mr. Deputy, as the government so eloquently explained at page 5 of its published annual borrowing plan, for the current fiscal year, the government only has parliamentary approval or authority for new borrowings total $130.1 million. So the primary purpose of that loan had to help refinance or roll over existing debt. If the government continues to insist that the $500 million is at all new borrowings and was not used to finance debt refinancing, then the government must provide evidence of the legal authority for them to do so and explain what was the $500 million used for. In other words, Mr. Deputy, if it was not used to pay an existing loan, then what was it used for? Stop keeping secrets. Come clean with the Bahamian people. If that's not bad enough, Mr. Deputy, you gave BPL more than $100 million. See page 24 of your fiscal strategy report. But you didn't do it in the proper way through subventions and allocated in the budget because that would increase your deficit. So you say it's a loan. You say you loaned BPL $100 million. That's what you said in your fiscal strategy. But that notwithstanding, the proceeds of this loan were paid out of the consolidated fund. The Constitution says anything that comes from the consolidated fund must be allocated in the budget and approved by Parliament. You had no approval to take $100 million from the consolidated fund and give it to BPL. You say it's a loan, but you don't have the terms of how it's going to be paid back. Mr. Deputy, it is amazing that you say you loaned $100 million to BPL. And that was done months ago. But yet, you cannot provide Parliament with the details as to what the interest payments is, what are the installment payments are, upon what terms will this money be paid back to the government. Tell the public the truth. Stop keeping secrets and come clean. Mr. Deputy, on economic growth, the government, without explanation, changed projections in the midterm budget from 5.5 growth to 1.1 economic growth. You decreased it. You said we no longer are going to make the 5.5 growth, but we are going to be downgraded to 1.1 in economic growth. But you seem resigned to this minimum growth level. From 14%, where you met it when you came to office, to now 1.1%. This is part of the problem. Why Bahamians are not feeling this so-called good times. Mr. Deputy, I want to make this clear. We in the FNM, we are convinced that the Bahamas has the capacity for sustained 3+% economic growth. Indeed, the country needs to target this level of growth to accommodate school graduates and to achieve higher wages and improve standards of living. This is our problem, not being able to achieve a consistently higher growth. The reality is that despite what is stated and the picture painted, until there is stronger growth, the country will continue to be the same. 1.7 and 1.5% over the next 3 years just won't do it. This is the status quo, and this is what needs to change. Debt is a big issue for the country. Look at how much the government is paying for debt and unable to borrow easily. Look at how much other countries around the region with much less potential than the Bahamas is paying for debt. Way less than us. Look at the outcome of the Rothschild contract. Our interest rates are still high. So it appears nothing has been achieved by the millions of dollars that was spent on the Rothschild contract. Look at how much the government continues to pay for domestic debt. You know, some who are well known to those on that side have given a cautionary note recently on that. Mr. Deputy, the truth is, we must expand growth, and we must fix our credit worthiness. But this budget does not change the status quo. The growth potential of the country must be changed. Debt must be reduced and not just transferred to PPPs. It must really be reduced. Cost of debt must come down. Policies must change to cause this to happen. And the status quo must change. But this is not it. Mr. Deputy, let me address the budget directly. You know, Winston Churchill said it this way, and I quote, he said, "I no longer listen to what people say. I watch what they do.
Yes, sir.
Behavior never lies." It doesn't matter what the government says. Watch where the money goes and how the money is spent. Watch where the money goes and watch how the money is spent. The PM said this morning, budgets are about choices and priorities. I agree with him 100%. This is why the public does not and cannot believe you. You are long on talk, but woefully short on action. These are some questions that I have to ask in looking at your budget. Just hand me the budget book there a minute. After going through this, you know, all the big talk on food security, one only needs to look at page 255 of your budget estimates. You've reduced the budget by $300,000. So all the big talk about food security, you've come down by $300,000 in your budget estimates. And out of a budget where you approved $1.2 million on food security, you only spent $200,000. Out of a budget of $1.2 million, you only spent $200,000. Now, I accept that this is the 9 months, so I accept this is not the full, budget year. But you have only spent $200,000 out of a possible $1.2 million. You touted the Agriculture Administrative Cadet Program. This was again mentioned in their last year's budget. But I invite you to look at page 159 and look at all of the money that you spent on this touted program. Agriculture Administrative Cadet Program, $0 was what you spent on this program. You again touted that you are going to develop the national sport. And look at all of the money that you spent on developing this as a national sport. $0. $0 was spent on this.
In your budget?
In health,
Fishing.
again, there was a national organ transplant program. I remember the Prime Minister made this as a big announcement that this is an initiative that this government is pressing, this government is focused behind. At page 165 of this budget, you said you needed $1.5 million for this program. That's what you said. We approved you for $1.5 million. You know how much was spent? A whopping $0
All of that?
was spent on this program.
Oh, zero?
Health and wellness program. Health and wellness program. At page 165, you allocated $1.5 million. You allocated $1.5 million for this program. How much was spent? $200,000. Why? I don't know. Maybe you will have to tell us why you only spent $200,000 when it was allocated at $1.5 million.
Priorities.
Choices
Choices.
and priorities.
Priorities.
Catastrophic health care program.
Tell us about that.
Catastrophic health care program. At page 165. At page 165. You allocated $10 million for this. You allocated $10 million for this. Going to help Bahamians with illnesses. Now I want to be very, and I have in my notes, that I want to be very serious with this one. Because it is a serious matter. It is. It is. But how can we explain to Bahamians and to my constituents why it is that there was only $2 million out of a possible $10 million fund, given the very acute and urgent needs of Bahamians everywhere? We have asked over and over for some clarity on this
You're
program,
gonna be explaining it, or?
for the documentation on how the program runs and what is the application process. But again, we have not received answers to these questions. In tourism, the Grand Bahama Promotion Board, out of a possible 226 budget, only 56 million was spent. In Grand Bahama, the CoLab at page 187. And this was a much touted program. Out of the $3 million that was allocated, only 178,000 was spent. Only 178,000
You
was
could
spent.
explain that. Explain it when you get a chance.
Ministry of Economic Affairs,
And she will explain.
Small Business Development Center, at page 156. You allocated just under $2 million, $1.9 million. But you spent $475,000. Is this out of the $50 million a year that the Prime Minister claimed he was committing to small business?
You know, see
After 3/4 of a fiscal year, the expenditure in that line item is less than 1% of the $50 million pledge. Also, consumer credit counseling at page 146.
Sorry, Mr. Deputy.
This consumer credit counseling
Honorable members,
was supposed to help fight inflation. But you've cut it in half, cut the budget in half, and you've only spent $0 with respect to this consumer credit counseling.
yes.
Now, again, I will treat the matter of social services with just as much respect. But of all of the struggling families, why have you not increased the social services? Why have you not increased social assistance in the social services budget? And I'm sure that the minister will tell us why,
Yes.
with Ranfully Home, he will tell us why in the budget book it only had $0 when you allocated $300,000. In finance, consultancy services, you've increased that. Why? We need to understand who else or which other consultants are being paid. But, Mr. Deputy, this one I think is a curious one. This next one. Air transport outside of the Bahamas in the OPM's budget, Office of the Prime Minister's budget. Taking account of all of the monies that you did not spend previously, let's look at what you did spend. At page 74, if anybody following.
They follow it. We follow it.
We definitely follow
We
it.
follow it.
In the 2022 budget, you spent $1.3 million in the 2022-2023 budget. For the whole year, you spent $1.3 million for that line item. Line item, air transport outside of the Bahamas. In 2023, you spent, for the first 9 months, not even the whole budget period, but for the first 9 months, you spent $1.5 million. But do you know how much was actually allocated for this budget? Do you know how much?
Tell us.
Tell us, man.
Tell us.
You know, Mr. Deputy, you have
Tell us.
allocations.
Say it slowly. Come on, tell us.
Tell us.
Now, you could spend what's in those allocations, or you could spend over what's in those allocations. But those allocations matter, because that's what Parliament approved you to spend.
That's right.
Parliament approved $181,000. That's how much Parliament approved for this line item. But how much was spent? $1.5 million for the first 9 months.
Wow.
For the first 9 months. You've allocated $181,000 that you said you were going to spend
181.
for the whole year. You said that. Nobody forced you to
That's
say
right.
that.
Nobody forced
That's what
them.
you said.
Nobody
And that's
forced
what
them.
Parliament approved.
181.
But you now say, and the numbers reflect that you have actually spent $1.5 million for the first 9 months in that line item.
Poor people, man. Poor people.
Don't listen to what
You see how much
is said.
You see how much
Watch what they do.
You see what y'all.
Watch where the money is spent.
My Lord. It's a shame. Shame.
Capital and finance, small and medium business support.
The chair recognizes the honorable member for Exuma and Ragged Island.
Acting Prime Minister.
Yeah.
East Grand Bahama speak about fiscal prudence. And he's urging this administration to go ahead and spend more. But I rise really to point out one of the fallacies in his argument, Mr. Deputy. And I think you could extend this to the logical conclusion. What the member failed to note when he talked about contributions to Family Island Regattas is that there was, in fact, a reallocation of responsibilities within ministries. And I invite him to look at page 83 so that he might elucidate some of his incomplete research, Mr. Deputy. And he would see that contributions to Family Island Regattas would have been moved to the Department of Local Government, and the amount almost fully spent, even though it's only 9 months. I think that would make him happy. It would make him happy that we've spent more than the 75%. I fail to comprehend his argument urging this administration to spend more as he speaks of fiscal prudence. I also invite him to, fact-check his research.
Thank you, honorable member.
Someone is providing him some numbers, but he should fact-check them.
Mr. Deputy,
Stay focused, my brother. Stay focused.
capital, finance,
Yes.
small and medium-sized business support at page 197. Again, for all of the talk about the 50 million, you spent 500,000 out of a budget of $5.5 million. And you decided you were going to reduce the budget for this budget. Again, just 1% or 1% of the 50 million pledge. Rent-to-own program at page 197. You spent $200,000 out of a possible budget allocation of $3.5 million. Performing Arts School at page 197, $49,000 out of a possible budget of $1 million. Hurricane precautions at page 197, $0. You may need to explain why the budget says $0 that you spent. The woman's shelter, $0. $0 from a possible $500,000. The road maintenance significantly reduced by $7 million. Cemeteries reduced Building maintenance, reduced. The health program to support health systems, again, reduced. And then I'm sure that the Minister for Grand Bahama is going to explain to us why the Prime Minister said $4 million for the bazaar, but there's only $1 million allocated in your capital budget to acquire the Royal Oasis, as well as only $1 million to demolish the Royal Oasis. Mr. Deputy, in Grand Bahama, you've decided that you will purchase the International Bazaar. But again, we see no evidence that you have completed the sale of the hotel. You have not yet started in terms of the new airport. You have now said that the Prime Minister said this morning, because that was one of my questions. The Prime Minister now says that the purchase of the Royal Oasis is included, because he didn't say that in his community, Princess. He now says that he didn't say that in his original budget communication. So obviously, that has to be included if you are going to look at the bazaar. It doesn't make sense to purchase the bazaar or do anything with the bazaar unless you do something with the hotel. So I will await to see the details on how it will be developed. They have also allocated $75 million that is supposed to come from the Port Authority. There is no indication that this is going to be paid. They have also they have also stated that they have not taken it into account for next budget period. So I don't believe you believe that this is going to be paid. No, we have no overall vision plan that has been presented for Grand Bahama. We all agree that the status quo must change.
Yes.
Everyone in this place believes the status quo must change.
Yes.
But to what? We need to understand what is your vision plan for Grand Bahama. You can't keep this a secret. The people of Grand Bahama ought to know what your plan is for Grand Bahama. And then, Mr. Deputy, PPP policy. Continuing an unfortunate pattern of ignoring government policy, parliamentary approval, and any sense of fiscal prudence, this current PLP administration continues to take on secret and hidden, unauthorized public debt, hiding behind so-called PPP arrangements for the delivery of infrastructure projects. They are entering more and more secret deals. The F&M created and published for all to see a PPP policy. In 2018, there was a PPP policy. It was created, it was tabled, it was produced, it was published. We let the world know that if you want to have a PPP with the Bahamas government, this is how it should be done.
Y'all say you're following that, right? Oh,
The F&M created this policy. But Mr. Deputy, if the Procurement Act and the PPP policy, if these documents are actually followed, and I want this point to be made. If the PPP policy is followed, if the Procurement Act is followed, governance in this country would be substantially different. If you follow these documents, that is how you change the status quo.
Yes, sir.
And this is what people want to see.
Yes.
They want to see clarity. They want to see an open bidding process.
Yes.
They don't want secret deals.
Complete job.
They want you to be able to tell the public about these PPPs and the details of them.
Yes.
On your secret off-book deals, you are contracting with vendors to pay for the work in installments over several years, usually, we believe, at interest rates much higher than the government would be able to secure from agencies that lend for public infrastructure. And then there's no bid. And then the deal is secret.
Shame.
Now, in the 2018 policy, if you were following the 2018 policy, here's what you would have to do. If you were following the government's 2018 PPP policy, the same one that you say you're building on in your fiscal strategy, this same one,
That's right.
this same one you say you are building on in your fiscal strategy,
Yours.
we would be having open market consultations in which information on the project is shared with the industry. You would also be having international publications of requests for expressions of interest. And you would also be having equal access to data by all bidders. So if you were going to have a PPP on a road project, you should have open market consultations on that road project. You should also have information about the project that's shared with the industry. You should also have a request for expressions of interest to the public. And you should also have equal access to data for all bidders. The government of the Bahamas, and this is, I'm quoting from the policy, the government of the Bahamas is committed to a fully transparent process that ensures that information about PPP projects and the performance of PPP projects is publicly available. Tell us where we could find the details of your PPP agreements. Tell us where we can find them. We are looking for them. We are looking for them. If the public can't find them, then I say they're secret. If the public can't find them.
What are the terms?
Also, I quote, the government will, and this again is in the policy document, the government will disclose PPP projects and program information as follows. Information on each potential PPP project and invitation for expressions will be published as a part of the tender process. PPP contracts will be published as soon as they become effective, along with a summary of key project features and commercial terms. We should know what the interest rates are that you have agreed the public pay for these PPP projects. We should know what those interest rates are. Mr. Deputy, we have a leader. We have a leader. Mr. Deputy, again, on the Freedom of Information Act, and I genuinely hope that this is not the case. I really hope that this is not the case. I hope that they will prove me wrong on this point. But if you look at the ombudsman, you know, we passed an ombudsman bill, which is now law. We passed the act. The government said it was necessary. It have to be done. We got to do it. How important it is, not important for the government, but important for the people of the country to be able to challenge what the government's decisions are. That's why it's important. It's important because it's an ability that you give to the people. It's a right that you give to the people to look at what you are doing and challenge what you are doing. So, Mr. Deputy, I searched in and out. You know, you have those electronic versions of the budget, and you could type in find and put the name in, and it tells you all of the places where this word shows up in the budget book. I typed in ombudsman. It does not appear once. It does not appear once in the budget book. Not once in the budget book. You put no money to it. We debated it, we approved it, but you have not allocated $1 for the ombudsman bill or for the implementation of the ombudsman. On the ease of doing business. On the ease of doing business. The FNM was focused. The FNM was focused. We tracked and we graded the ease of doing business measures. This government.
Order, honorable members.
This government seems not to care about the ease of doing business for Bahamians. The FNM amended the legislation to allow persons with low-risk businesses to create a provisional license so that within 48 hours of a submission of a full application to permit them to begin business operations for up to 90 days while they await the formal license approvals. So once you apply, once you submit all of your documents, in 48 hours, you could start doing your business for those low-risk businesses. That was an initiative created by the FNM. Also in 2018, the FNM created the online portal for business startups so that you didn't have to be submitting applications to all these different places. One place, online, you submit your application, submit your documents, and then let the government do what it needs to do in the background. In 2018, the FNM brought in relief for and eliminated business license fees for micro, small businesses. So what does the PLP do? They increase business licenses for large businesses. But I want you to listen to the business community. Listen to the private sector. Make it easier for businesses to pay taxes. Make it easier for businesses to report. And also, we want you to support the development of micro, small, and medium-sized businesses, particularly...
Member.
Mr. Deputy. We want you to support the development of micro, small, and medium-sized businesses, particularly for young people. Young people are asking what is in this budget for them. And one of the things we would like for you to do is to set aside specific funding for the development of young people when it comes to developing their businesses and making them entrepreneurs. More funding we want you to do. Now also, Mr. Deputy, when it comes to promotion of the digital economy, the FNM started the development of a national digital marketplace. It would have provided opportunities for small businesses and other Bahamian entrepreneurs to trade their goods locally and also internationally. We must promote also the Bahamian sand dollar digital currency. Also, Mr. Deputy, we must see real progress with creating a ministry and a minister around the cabinet table that is focused on technology and ICT. We must promote this industry. Government services must lead the way. And we're not just talking about promoting them in the government system, but nationally, we ought to be a country that focuses on promoting digitization. and focuses on nationally the digital transformation. We need more progress with respect to the My Gateway platform. We need to see this become a fully interoperable program. The idea behind this design was so that wherever you are, you would be able to apply for government services. And the one key feature of this program was for there to be a goal, because we hadn't reached there yet, but for there to be a goal that once the government has a piece of information about you, that no other government office is allowed to ask you for that piece of information. So once you have a government ID issued by the government of the Bahamas, then no other government agency ought to be asking you for that government ID. If it's a passport, if it's a driver's license, a national insurance card, if you are able to do that digitally, and then you will do away with having to wait for the paper, wait for the cards. You could have it on your phone. You could digitally have your ID on your phone. And so if you go into any government ministry, you are able to identify yourself through using, and that includes NIB, that includes road traffic, that includes driver's license, that includes going to the bank, that includes looking at any utilities. That is where we ought to be heading towards. That also should include payment, because the way how the online process was supposed to be heading, the way how My Gateway was supposed to also be heading, was to add on different industries. So you ought to be able to add on banks. You ought to be able to add on utility companies, so that I can, if I want to pay a utility company, I could do that right online. I could do that right with my phone. I could move my money straight from the bank, straight to the utility company by using my phone and by using My Gateway. That's where we ought to be heading towards. We also ought to be looking at when you are incorporating a business, and when you are doing your, when you are applying for a business license, all of that process should be combined. So that if I want to apply for a business license, I should be at the very same place, be able to incorporate that business at the same location. Why? Because it's the same government. You apply for approval for a business license at a government office. You apply to incorporate a company at a government office. It is the same government. So why should I have to apply at two different places for a process that could be done in the same place and for the same purpose? We're talking about getting a business license and incorporating a business. And in most cases, if you get a business license, in most cases, you will also incorporate a business. It took us, when we looked at this in Estonia, it took them under 20 minutes. Under 20 minutes to apply and be approved for a business license and incorporate a company in under 20 minutes. Mr. Deputy, another question also that ought to be raised is the supplemental approval for the midterm budget. Mr. Deputy, we watched and waited for the government when it came to them producing their budget bills. And if you remember correctly, the Prime Minister said that a bill would have come to deal with their error in the midterm budget, where they attempted to move $10 million from recurrent to capital. Or sorry, on the other way around. They attempted to move from the capital, $10 million from the capital to the recurrent. You needed a bill to do so. You needed a bill to move monies from capital to recurrent. The Prime Minister said yes, that bill will be coming. Well, we still are awaiting that bill. We still are awaiting when you are going to get parliamentary approval to do what you did during the midterm budget process. Mr. Deputy, in my last 8 minutes, I do want to speak a little bit about East Grand Bahama. I'm very pleased that the government has decided to continue the F&M started project of microgrids in East Grand Bahama. It is an important project. It is a very important project that I'm happy that after months and months of waiting and asking questions about it, you have decided to proceed with this. Now, there's one issue that was raised that I asked the government to address. If you have a microgrid project and you are able to, and that microgrid project is tapped into the Grand Bahama Power, and the Grand Bahama Power is able to purchase power from the microgrid, then those persons who live in that area ought to be able to see a reduction in the amount that they are paying when you take into account this microgrid that is being sold to Grand Bahama Power. We would like for the government to take an active or a proactive role in the discussions with the power company and ensure that there is the savings for those persons who live in that area. Because again, we need to be able, the people need to be able to see that if this microgrid project becomes a reality, which we hope it will, that they will be able to see the benefits and see a reduced power bill as a result of this microgrid project. So that is most definitely something that we are advocating for, something that must happen. Also, we also must advocate for the school in Swedenski. I was recently told that a team went down to Swedenski and was doing an assessment. Again, I'm hopeful that there will be some progress made on constructing that school, the necessary school that can renovate that entire government building, government complex. We are hopeful that that school will be repaired. We are also, again, asking for, demanding, advocating for the seawall in High Rock. The seawall in High Rock must be done. It must be completed. And I saw in your budget where there was a East Grand Bahama allocation for coastal, that may be the seawall. And the minister is saying, yes, that is the seawall. So we are very hopeful that that is going to start this fiscal period, that is going to get moving this fiscal period. So we are very pleased that that was included, and we are very hopeful that those folks in High Rock also will see the benefits of that. And then also, with respect to Waterkey, again, we've had this discussion on, okay. So we are hopeful again that we'll be able to see some progress with respect to the dock in Waterkey. Again, it is essential. It is something that needs to happen. And so we, again, are advocating that that dock in Waterkey, that dock in Waterkey also be done. And then also, the minister, we also, there was a dredging project a dredging project that was started in Swedenski. And so we need to understand what the status of the dredging program is, because again, in Swedenski, you only are able to get into Swedenski with small boats, And even with those small boats, you are only able to get into Sweet and Ski at different times. So you are only be able to get into there definitely when the tide is high. So a dredging program was started. It had stopped. We need to understand what the status of that dredging program is. When is it going to continue? What the issue is going to be. So we need to understand what's happening with respect to the dredging program. Mr. Deputy, as we've said, this budget, Mr. Deputy, unfortunately does not provide the necessary relief. It does not provide the necessary help and hope for ordinary Bahamians. It also does not provide the necessary ease of doing business, assistance for small businesses and for businesses across the country. It does not provide us with any economic growth plan. We need to understand why it is that you put the growth projections from 5.5 to 1.1. This country can achieve, we believe, growth levels of over 3%. And that would accommodate those persons, those new persons who are coming into the job market. That would accommodate. People will then begin to feel what is being done. They are going to see higher wages. They are going to see the assistance that is required. So we need to see and we need to understand, and this budget does not have it. The budget also promises to change the status quo, but it changes the status quo in the wrong direction. And so we are saying to the government, yes, it does change the status quo, but it unfortunately makes things worse. So, Mr. Deputy, this is the contribution for East Grand Bahama. I am extremely grateful to the people of East Grand Bahama for providing me with this opportunity to be able to speak on their behalf. Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy.
Thank you, Honourable Member. The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Pinewood.